Top middle.
Well, first of all, I have to apologize. You people are stuck with me tonight as the acting chair. So if we really screw things up, I'll blame it all on Jane. Jane is allowing us to use her Zoom account. First of all, I think most important, I want to thank both Jane and Karen Bjorklund for being of so much help in putting this meeting together. I've got everyone on mute, and it's simply so that we don't get excessive feedback and echoing in these calls. If you've been to any Zoom meetings, and I think everyone on this call probably has, you know what happens when some people leave their microphones open and the dogs start barking or the kids start crying, and it can get pretty discombobulating. So I have everyone on mute. Do you know how to use if you want to say something, raise your hand. You know where that control is at the bottom of the screen under, let's see, it should be under reactions. If you press on the reactions, a number of little emojis will come up, and one of them, the far left-hand corner, is a hand. And if you click on that, or at the bottom it says raise your hand. So if I see hands raised, I will try to call on you. Otherwise, I've just raised my hand so you can see it, and now I'm going to lower it again. That's all there is to it. We just want to try to keep some order in the meeting so we can move along, because we have a very, very full agenda tonight. Our next meeting, we are not planning on having a meeting until mid-December, unless something comes along that will make it happen. And that would probably be a land use issue or something extremely important. Otherwise, the new board that was set up, we pretty well agreed it made sense to probably only have about 4 meetings a year. We may have more if there is a need for them. Grover, you had your hand up and then you dropped it. Was there something you wanted to say?
It was a thumbs up, Ed.
Okay, thank you. The new board who was elected was Linda Newman, Lisa Bentley, Virginia Foster, and who did I forget?
You're sitting in a field of flowers.
In any case, Lisa resigned from the board. She's staying on the land use committee because she had too many things going on in her life at the same time. So our land use committee will be made up of me, Karen Bjorklund, Linda Newman, and Lisa Bentley. Other than that, there is really very little more I have to say before we start the meeting. And as I said before, I have everyone muted. As you join, if you're not muted, please mute yourself so that we can avoid unnecessary feedback. First of all, I'd like to call on the people who are here, ask you to introduce yourself, just a name and a street, please. I'm Ed Kroenke. I live on Ryderson. Jane?
My name is Jane Morrison and I live on Jennings. And don't forget, you can unmute yourself temporarily by hitting the space bar, hitting and holding the space bar.
Thank you very much. Okay, Angie Kohler, is she in the room?
Hello, my name's Angie. My name's Brenda. And Brenda says hello.
They don't see me.
Thank you. Kathleen Weaver. Hey, Weaver. How about Tom Weaver? I know he's here. Tom? Irene Beckler. Karen Bjorklund, is Karen with us yet? She said she would only be here for part of the meeting. Cynthia Quackenbush.
I'm Cynthia. I live on Jennings, right between Jane and Pat.
Oh, you're a neighbor of mine. I didn't even realize that. Angie Kohler.
Angie introduced herself and her sister.
Thank you. Hello.
Robert Kunis. How about Larry Hermo? These are all people who have registered, so I was assuming that they were here. Linda, you introduced yourself already. Susan Spitz. Greg Smith. Press the space bar, Greg. Then we can hear you. Okay,
You said have unmuted.
I think I can hold you on mute.
Yeah, just to temporarily unmute yourself, press and hold the space bar while you talk. And then when you're done talking, let go of the space bar.
While you talk.
Okay, this is Greg Smith. I'm sorry, I haven't done this for quite a while. I live on LaCour Court off of Glen Echo.
Good to see you, Greg. Kevin Williams.
Good evening, Kevin Williams. I live on Southeast Howard Street. I also serve on the Oak Lodge Water Services Board of Directors.
Kelly King. Jane Sabaletti. Press the space bar, Jane.
Jane Civiletti, I'm a member of the Oak Grove Community Council.
Pat Reiner.
Here I am, Pat Reinert. Hi, everybody.
Where do you live, Pat?
I live on Jennings Avenue.
Okay. Now that was the end of the list I have, but I know Mark Shaw is here. Mark, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening, Jennings Lodge. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I look forward to hearing about the issues up there and see what the county can do for you. Thank you very much.
Paul Savas.
Hello, everyone. Paul Savas, former Jennings Lodge CPO member, currently Oak Grove resident, always have been, but I had my business in Jennings Lodge. Good to be with you again. Been attending these meetings for 20 years, I believe, or more. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul and I spent a lot of time in the trenches together.
And I think we've got at least two more people. I don't know if Mary Piper has introduced herself, and also Vicente Escalante has. Vicente, have you introduced yourself yet?
Who do you want to call on, Jane?
Also us.
Oh, also you. Yes, please
Yeah,
introduce yourself.
I was muted before. I'm Sharon. My husband Larry Hermo is right by me. We're on a flag lot off of Bland Street between Boardman and Jennings.
Who else haven't we introduced?
Lisa Bentley.
Oh,
Yeah, Jen. Lisa Bentley, River Drive. Thank you.
And Steve Berliner looks familiar.
Steve Berliner, Southeast Hall Avenue, and also your representative on the North Clackamas Watersheds Council. I love this little space bar trick. Thank you, Jane. That's cool.
Thank you, Steve. Virginia, did we introduce you before?
Virginia Foster, and I'm on J Street off of Ryerson Road.
You're within walking distance from my house.
That's right.
Who else we haven't introduced?
Hi, this is Jan Carruthers. I live on Jennings. I live on Boardman.
He wants to be part of the pack.
We get lose track, you know. It's a
Right.
big community.
Mercury, did you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, my name is Masiri.
Miss Siri, thank you.
I live on Meldrum and River. I guess on the, was that the southwest corner?
Great, welcome.
Anyone else?
This is Kitty Walker, and I live on Faith Avenue in the Jennings Lodge Estates.
Oh, good to see you, Kay. Anyone else before we move ahead?
This is Grover Bornefeld, and I live on Boardman Avenue.
I'm sorry, Grover. I didn't mean to skip you. Anyone else?
I'm Louise Anderson. I live on the corner of Elston Court and Blanton, just second house north of Jennings. And I signed in late, just after 6:30 tonight. So that's why you didn't have me on your list.
Okay. And we got everybody now. We've got a pretty full room here. Okay, let's go ahead. First of all, Pat, would you give us the treasurer's report? How much money do we have?
The U.S. Bank, as of August 31st, 2021, says we have $2,655.78.
Did you add any money since we got the treasury from Grover?
No.
Oh, I thought someone told you that's one of the duties of the treasurer. You automatically kick $5 in every month. If you don't.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Okay.
That's the treasurer's responsibility, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Next, the minutes of the June 22nd meeting. Those were sent out to everybody. I think we'll do this the easy way. Is there anyone who has any changes to the minutes? Are there any objections to the minutes? I don't see any. Do you, Jane? Then I think we'll consider the minutes as approved as presented. And let's move ahead. Oh, and we're pretty much on schedule. The Oak Lodge Governance Project. The two presenters tonight will be Mitra Anushravani, who used to be a resident of Jennings Lodge until I guess she figured she got too good for us and moved to Oak Grove, and Eleanor Hunter, an old friend who's lived in Oak Grove for as long as I can remember. So you want to get things started, Mitra, and tell us what your group has been doing.
Sure thing. First of all, in no way, shape, or form have I become too good for Jennings Lodge. I had the opportunity to purchase my grandparents' house, which is situated in Oak Grove, and I am still a property owner in Jennings Lodge, so I have a foot in both communities.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for having us here tonight. I really appreciate the invitation from the JLCPO board to be here. And I know that some of you may have received an announcement if you're part of our email list or had seen the reminder today from the CPO about tonight's meeting that this big report that we've been talking about for an awful long time is finally completed. And I want to acknowledge that it is completed a little bit in advance of when we had expected it to be completed. And therefore, Eleanor and I have not had a chance to digest the 120 pages that it is, and we will keep our presentation as we had planned, which we had expected to be in advance of that report. That said, we are planning on having a community meeting. OLGP is hosting our info session on October 9th. And later in the meeting, I'll post, Eleanor will circle back to that, and we'll post a link so you can register for that meeting. And that's going to be the first of many opportunities to really come together and digest 120 pages. Maybe some of you have had a chance to do that today. Good for you. So with this evening's presentation, what we would like to be able to do is offer just some context about who we are, how we've come to this point, and why some key decisions have been made. So Eleanor, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Just to get rolling here, I think we have about 40 minutes and we want to make sure we have time for some questions at the end. I just wanted to provide some background on incorporation in this area. So for a sense of perspective, Milwaukee was incorporated in 1903 and Gladstone was incorporated in 1911. So there's been a desire to incorporate in this area. It's risen up many times, and a recent one was done by the Friends of Local Control, and that was between about 2009 and 2012. And at that time, the most frequently asked questions were, what's it going to cost? And why do we need another layer of government? So the question, what's it going to cost, naturally leads to the question of, well, what does it currently cost? And what are we currently getting for what we're paying for? So another question that often comes up is, what's the difference between urban areas and rural areas of the county? And how much does each pay into the county coffers? And how much does each area receive in services? So as you all know, as a CPO here, that CPOs are advisory only. And under the current structure, the residents really don't have a really powerful way to directly influence or really effectively participate in shaping the future of our community. And I think we all have lots of examples of how things have worked or not worked. So these are some of the factual issues and questions. And then there's also personal and sort of value-driven reasons that would be behind incorporation. Because economics aren't the only reason to want to look at a governance change. Values are really vastly more important. So at this time, there are 10 members of the steering committee on the Oak Lodge governance project. And some of us have known each other for many years, and some of us have met, like Mitra and I just met through working on this project together. And we're under no illusion that we represent the diversity of this community in terms of geographic representation or ethnicities or economics. We do, however, have a pretty good mix of ages and genders and outlooks and orientations. And we're just a group of volunteers. We have families, jobs, other volunteer activities who feel we feel that things could be better. And we got together to try to get some answers to these fundamental questions. We have a wide range of personal motivations for engaging in this. These, again, are reflective of a lot of our values. Some of us want to have, we seek safe access to public parks. Some of us want to have a comprehensive transportation system that's less dependent on automobiles, or help provide housing options that satisfy a full range of residents. And we really want to address the systemic policies that continue to marginalize some of our family members, our neighbors, our coworkers, and our friends. So 2 examples of how we feel that we really don't have a lot of direct ability to really impact our community and how it's developed and what the future is that recent placement of the storage unit in the center of the area right across from Fred Meyer's. And as all of you are more than aware of, the complete infilling of what used to be the Evangelical Retreat Center without any park area. So again, those are just sort of 2 examples of how this urban area with rural codes we really don't have a lot to say over what takes place. So as a result of these motivations and this clear lack of agency for this area, the 10 of us got together and we formed the Oak Lodge Governance Project, because we want to explore the future of local governance for this unincorporated urban area for Oak Grove and Jennings Lodge. As many of you know, currently the only elected officials charged with comprehensive planning for the area are the 5 Clackamas County Commissioners, 2 of whom are here tonight. Hello, thank you very much for being here. And they're elected from across this county, which is larger than the state of Rhode Island. And frankly, we question whether this is really enough direct representation to effectively govern this densely populated area. So we feel that there's a real profound mismatch between our urban area and the rural form of governance that we currently have. So the Oak Lodge Governance Project Steering Committee, we believe that discussions about our area's future need to be grounded in facts and data. And we've created that foundation for community conversations by this research study that's just come out. And that study is on economics and governance options. And it was done by Echo Northwest, Tiberius Solutions, Morgan CPS Group, and 3J Consulting. With that, I'll turn it over to Mitra to give us a little more information about the grant.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. So I'm going to go into the weeds about how some key decisions were made so that when you eventually get to really sit down and grapple with what's in this report, you already have some fundamental questions about how things came to be answered to begin with. So in 2019, two members of our community initiated a conversation with Metro about some local issues, including questions about the efficacy of our present governance structure. And knowing that it would take resources to get some baseline data for substantive conversations, our representative, Christine Lewis, had suggested applying for a planning and development grant in the 2020 cycle. So over the remainder of 2019, additional folks interested in the same issues coalesced around writing this grant. So in early 2020, grant writing began in earnest. Initially, it had been suggested that within the planning and development grant, we apply for the equitable development grant, which would have yielded us resources of $300,000 to $400,000 to get this information and included money for community engagement. And we wrote that grant proudly. And upon draft review, Metro staff suggested that our aims were actually a little better suited for a new area planning grant instead. So we took their feedback, reconfigured the grant, and reduced our scope substantially because there would be considerably less resources available, down from the potential to $300,000 and $400,000 to about $125,000, and we would not have funding for community engagement. And while a little bit bummed at the reduced scope, we moved ahead in the new direction anyway because we felt like the research and data that we'd get would still be of significant value to the community, and we knew that this would be a phase one of to be determined amount of phases, and that community engagement will happen along the way. That said, there have been opportunities for public engagement and feedback, and Eleanor will talk more about that a little bit later. And if you're curious about the grant application, it's on our website, though I suspect you're probably less curious about the application at this point and more curious about the actual report. So in late summer of 2020, we found out we were being awarded the full $125,000. And because OLGP is just simply a group of private citizens with no legally identifying ownership of anything, I mean, we're not even a 501c3, we're really just a group of people, Metro needed to create a fiscal sponsor in order, a government agency to be able to hold the money and write the checks. So we asked Clackamas County and City of Milwaukee if either one of them would be willing to serve as our fiscal sponsor, and both declined. And then from there, seeking the path of least resistance and greatest efficiency, Metro sought legal counsel to determine if they could themselves serve as our fiscal sponsor, and it was determined in the affirmative. And at that point, the grant reduced from 125 to 100 because $25,000 of that was to be allocated for staff support to help administer the grant. And since now this was going to be absorbed by Metro staff, that was no longer necessary funding. And in the end, frankly, we feel really confident that this was the best way to handle this particular issue. While it probably would have been fine to have had either Clackamas County or City of Milwaukee serve as our fiscal sponsors, they are both entities being studied in this report. And at best, it would have been a little bit awkward. At worst, a definite conflict of interest. And frankly, it just led to a more efficient use of taxpayer dollars since Metro was able to absorb that cost and use their current funding to be able to administer the grant. Now, also in keeping with fiscal efficiency goals, we were required to work within Metro's pre-approved list of consultants, as opposed to going through a really lengthy and costly RFP process. That sort of process absolutely has value and its place. But in this particular situation, the study that we were commissioning was so highly specialized, we frankly wouldn't have had a lot of options to begin with. And we felt really confident that who we got is really the best of the best. With 3J and Eco Northwest at the helm, they have worked extensively in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, and even within Clackamas County. They're both highly regarded within their field, and it's been a real pleasure working with them. So because we only had $100,000, we didn't have the budget to work with a sky's the limit scope of all the possibilities that we could ever imagine for all the people in this area. So we were given the framework to work within presently legally available options. And with that in mind, we needed to create 3 potential scenarios to eke out the most amount of data for our dollars for determining potential governance and fiscal consequences to the area. And to that end, the 3 scenarios in the report are remaining unincorporated, annexing into the city of Milwaukee, and incorporating Oak Lodge into its own city. Again, understanding that these aren't reflective of the only options, they're not reflective of whether or not this whole area would want to do the same option, but they are just 3 ways to get some baseline data to begin conversation. So a question that I suppose some of you are already asking yourselves, well, why study Milwaukee and not Gladstone, especially in Jennings Lodge, because you are much closer to the city of Gladstone? Well, we're expecting this. I think you heard me mention before that this will be at the first phase of a to be determined amount. And this really is the first phase of study. And in later studies, I would imagine that annexing into Gladstone would inevitably come up, and that option would definitely be explored a little bit more. So Milwaukee, we went with Milwaukee for this first round because frankly, it has more in common with the study area, like population size and some shared service providers already. And it would be the most useful in creating an apples to apples scenario with a potential new city. So now we have the consultant team in place and we know the 3 scenarios. It's time to develop the scope of work. And so to be of the greatest value to our community, we wanted feedback as to what questions you would want answered. And to that end, we created a community survey in late 2020. Eleanor, I'm going to pass it back to you and I can pull up my screen share to talk about those questions.
And one little minor course correction, it actually wasn't October of 2020, it was October of 2019. And you have just moved my, hang on, I don't have my notes now in front of me. If you can.
Yep, I'll stop sharing. Sorry.
There we go. Thank you so much. Okay, good. So in October of 2019, learning that in fact that we had received the grant and that the research study would happen when the scope of the project was finalized, we had a little time in there and we took the opportunity to do a check-in, take a quick pulse of the community to see if we had missed anything. Now, none of us are experts, but we have been involved with this for a long time and talking to lots of people in the community, but we realized it was a great opportunity to see if we were on the right track. So we had a link to the survey was published in the October 25th Clackamas Review article that announced the existence of the OLGP and the award of the grant. And we asked just 3 simple open-ended questions. The first one was, regarding local economic issues, what questions do you want to have answered? And the second one was, in a study that's researching local governance options, incorporation, annexation, staying the same, what questions do you want to have answered? And the third question was, anything else you'd like to comment on or share with us? We were looking for people to give us some feedback. So as expected, we found that across all 3 questions, there was a significant share of responses that expressed concern or aversion to tax increases. Although many of those concerns were tempered by a desire to understand the cost-benefit balance that comes with local control. And so for the economic question, people were really interested to know whether the tax base is economically viable in this area, and if not, what could be done about that? There's a really strong desire to see hard numbers. People really wanted to have certainty and clarity about service levels and costs. And there's also a desire to learn the balance of tax revenue and expenditures in our area under county administration and how that would compare to scenarios where a city was in control. So those were all, issues and thoughts that we had already been wondering about. So we felt on that first question, we were really on track. Now, on the second question about local governance, it showed that a lot of respondents had questions about what are the powers and responsibilities of a city, largely in terms of land use and revenue authorities. Some people asked very specifically, can you limit the number of car lots? And others wanted to know about different law enforcement or different services and many people expressed a lot of satisfaction with current service providers, and they were concerned that joining a city might negatively impact those service providers. So while there's significant interest in local control over planning services that are currently provided by the county, like land use planning, law enforcement, street maintenance, that kind of thing, nobody had any interest in a city taking over the services or the assets from existing service providers such as the Oak Lodge Water Services District or the North Clackamas Parks and Rec District. Those are both very beloved services districts. So responses also indicated that there was uncertainty about the role and the function of cities. And people were concerned that if the area joined a city, that the zoning would be significantly altered or that Metro's authority over the area might change. Again, those were all things that we had under consideration. So again, on question 2, we felt that we were pretty much on track. Now that third question, that third open-ended question, is there anything else you'd like to comment on? That was the most useful to us because we realized in that there was really a basic lack of understanding that this study, again, we'll keep repeating it, this is at the very beginning. This is the first phase of something. It fits into a much larger, longer process that may or not culminate in any kind of change. We don't know. So a lot of comments showed that there's a concern this is a late stage and consequential decisions had already been made, and that there's a real desire to have clear certain things about the potential future of this area. So again, this is not about pushing any kind of solution, but it's wanting to find out what's actually going on now and what might happen under certain circumstances. So while there were a number of insightful questions and comments, overall, it felt really good to have the validation that we were really on track on these significant issues. So again, this is unlike other processes that have taken place in the area. There's no answer that's being promoted. We don't have any agenda from anybody outside or anything. This is strictly resident-led. We're asking open-ended questions to get factual information that can help guide broad community engagement done neighbor to neighbor. So while taking the survey, we also reached out to neighbors who were involved in previous local governance efforts to, again, make sure that we're course correcting. So we had a meeting with about 20 or 25 people where Ed Gronke, as all of you know Ed Gronke, he gave a really valuable lesson on the previous efforts. And he cited 2 of the most valuable lessons that were learned in one of the previous incorporation efforts, was that there must be a lot more information provided and not to think of this area as all wanting the same thing or being like one cohesive area. So again, we learned from the past, we reached out to our neighbors, and we incorporated all of that information into the scope of work, which Mitra will now detail for us.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. And we took all of this information that she just detailed and we presented it to the consultants. And we recorded that Zoom meeting and made it publicly available because one of the many things that we learned from this survey was that our community shares OLGP's commitment to transparency. And we wanted to honor that value in the community by making this meeting available for everyone to be able to view, so that there could be confidence that this study had its best efforts to represent as many of us as possible. And that meeting is also available to you on our website. So from this meeting, we still had work to do before the scope of work was finalized. We needed to determine the potential service providers to be modeled in the 3 scenarios and to establish the study boundary. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, here we go. Let's go present, here we go. So as you are reading the report, is it loading? There we go. You will see that North Clackamas Parks and Rec, Oak Lodge Water Service District, and Clackamas Fire District are all remaining the same. They are constant in all 3 scenarios. There is no change. If you come to this report and you ask, what would it cost for a new city to, have its own fire department. You won't find that specific answer in this report. Instead, what you'd find is how much it presently cost us to participate in Clackamas Fire, in the Clackamas Fire District. And that's the same for OLWSD and NCPRD. So there are numbers in there, but they are not comparing any other additional option. And we did those three particular services because we wanted to look at services that we actually felt like had the potential for change. And these three, we know that there's a high degree of satisfaction. And so we figured we're going to maintain these as constant. So this means that the group that are modeled differently include policing, transportation, stormwater management, community development, and governmental administration. And a couple of clarifying points. Some of you who are really familiar with OLWSD may be going, well, doesn't Oak Lodge Water provide some stormwater services? And that is true. It is a shared service between the county and OLWSD. The parts of stormwater that fall within OLWSD jurisdiction are remaining constant, and that is watershed protection. So that's modeled consistently throughout the study. Stormwater management, capital improvements, and infrastructure, that falls to the county, and that is being modeled differently amongst the three scenarios. Another question is community development. That is an awfully broad term. So here that includes land use planning, permitting, economic development, and code enforcement. So that's what I have for you on the service providers you will find in the report. And now, I didn't want to, here, let me get to another slide. Talk about the boundary of the actual study. Hold on just a second. Where did it go? There we go. All right. So what area is actually being studied? First, our objective in creating the boundary for this was to honor the existing communities that are here. The Oak Grove Community Council and the Jennings Lodge CPO. Our primary objective was to keep those intact as much as possible. And to that end, almost all of the OGCC and the entirety of the JLCPO are within the study area. Our second goal was to avoid pushing into the urban growth management areas, the UGMAs. You'll see those in the hatch marked area, in the hatch marked spots on the map. Now, these areas, while they are technically unincorporated, they have been designated by either the city of Milwaukee or the city of Gladstone for potential future annexation. And to that end, the cities have been contracted with the county to provide select services to these unincorporated areas that would normally be serviced exclusively by the county, understanding that these municipal services are being provided with the assumption that these are potential future tax bases. So this is a really kind of confusing way of saying that these hatch marked areas are the city of Milwaukee calling dibs and the city of Gladstone calling dibs on these areas for the future. In order to disentangle the UGMA into potentially incorporating into a new city that is not the city of Milwaukee or the city of Gladstone, it is a complicated statute-riddled process. And we really, really wanted to avoid including that in our study, because we knew that if in fact this whole area did want to incorporate, those specific areas would have to be managed a little bit differently. That said, if we had done that, then half of Jennings Lodge would be included in the study area and half would be excluded. And that felt more wrong to us than including the UGMA boundary within the boundary. So we asked politely the city of Gladstone if we may include this in our study, and they said yes. Now, you heard me mention a little bit that there's a tiny part of the OGCC that exists. It's not on this map, but there's like a tiny little island above Aldercrest. We asked the city of Milwaukee if we could include that in our study, and they said no, it is not a significant portion of land. So that's why I cannot say all of OGCC is included. So with the study boundary determined, that really set our scope of work and set the path forward for the study being completed. And then that happened, I think, January. And since then, we've had 2 representatives from our steering committee. I'm going to stop my screen share. Meet with the consultant team every 2 weeks or so to give feedback, answer questions, offer guidance. And I do want to state that while Metro has been the fiscal sponsor, they have been entirely hands-off in this process. And this relationship really has been exclusively between the consultant team and OLGP. And so now we have a report and we're really excited for you to read it. Eleanor, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. And you're absolutely right. It's 2020. I got to change my notes. It's 2020. All this happened in 2020. So from December of 2020, when the research started getting going, we've been doing the best we can with the means of communication that we have available. As we all know, public communication and engagement in this area is always a challenge. So we've had just about monthly op-ed articles in the Clackamas Review, and hopefully some of you have read them. In April and May, we put in a series of weekly articles where each of the 10 members of the steering committee, we all wrote a personal motivation piece of why are we doing this? Why are we spending lots of hours and lots of time and lots of passion, to be part of this volunteer effort? And for me, it was really fascinating because, again, it's getting to know everybody and to understand where everybody's real desires and values really show up in that way. In addition, we have Twitter and Facebook and Instagram accounts. We've been posting notices every month in Thelma Hagenmiller's calendar. And we've been doing monthly info sessions on the 2nd Saturday of the month. I know many of you on this call have participated in those, and thanks for being here as well. We're going to be doing our 7th one, and that'll be, again, the 2nd Saturday of October. It's October 9th, always the 2nd Saturday of the month, from noon to 1. We also have a website coming up, and we've been reaching out and having conversations at Willamette View and different things like that. So again, October 9th, let's see, Mitra has just put in the chat, she's put the Zoom link that's in there so that you can all participate. And again, on October 9th, we will be discussing the summary, the executive summary, and the results of the report. So just again, to be very clear, the public engagement portion of this effort has yet to truly begin. So far, between October and the end of the year, because it's holiday season, we're going to be reaching out, sort of call it like a soft launch. We're going to be reaching out to various community groups and members that we know to start working with those embedded groups that already exist. And then really in January of 2022, that's where we're going to start another process of going out to individuals and finding out how to be doing this on Zoom and making safe ways to be able to promote and extend this information to everybody and start those rich community conversations. So again, we're just finding out about that information that's in the study, and all we're trying to do is answer those fundamental questions that have gone unanswered for far too long. So while this report it will answer a number of questions, we know that it's also going to raise even more of them. And so we look forward to additional additional phases of research. And again, issues that come up through those community conversations. We are happy to speak to any community group you guys have. If anyone wants to communicate that with us, you can throw something in the chat right now or get in touch with us at oaklodgegovernance@gmail.com. So happy to take any questions. And again, please do come to the October 9th session. Again, you can sign up for that on our website, which is oaklodgegovernanceproject.org. Thanks, everyone, very much.
I'm glad you're not selling storm windows. Thank you very much. That was quite a good presentation. Questions, use the raise your hands feature. If you can't figure out how to do it, just wave at me. Someone must have some questions. Let's hear them. We've got about 10 minutes available for questions.
Greg Smith has his hand up.
Greg, go ahead. Push your brace, get the space bar down, Greg. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I haven't been active in this communication with what you've been doing, but I have been a board member and director of the Jennings Lodge CPO, so I know a lot of the existing history myself. I've lived here 43 years. And I got on here specifically to involve my neighbors who have not, I live in a neighborhood association. We have not discussed any of this in our neighborhood association meetings that I know personally. And so we're not all hyped up about becoming a city right now at all, period. We want to have a lot more discussion. We need to have a lot more people involved. These two people, I'm glad that they're doing their homework, but believe me, you don't have a clue of how many people really are not in favor of a city incorporation right now or ever. So right now, I'm here to say I'm doing my part to try to let you know I'm not going to do anything in a positive way except to help the community like I've always done. And I've always wanted to help the area. I didn't live here this many years just so that we can see the neighborhoods go down and being governed by areas that are a lot larger than ours and making Jennings Lodge not as effective as it has been in the past. And that's why I've been having good results with Clackamas County personally on development and code enforcements. We don't have a great area in Portland that can take care of this, but when I've had neighbors who are trying to do businesses in our area, Clackamas County's been there helping me on 3 of them just recently, as an example. And I just decided finally, Tom woke me up with some of the stuff that I took it all for granted. But when I found out what's going on, I decided I'd have to get back in and do my part to be positive for the community and not let this thing happen without a lot more positive things besides what was discussed today. Because I don't think we want to have roads taken away like Portland has done and basically said it's for bicycles and walking only or light rail or mass transit. They don't want cars at all in Portland. If that's what we're moving into in this area, I don't want to be part of it. And that's just some of what I wanted to talk about. Don't have enough time because I know others want to talk too, but I want to make sure you know I'm here to help our area and take care of our area in a positive way and make sure that you all have the say. And I'd like to hear personally what you all feel about it as well, because it's not what our area has been talking about. If it was talking about it, it sure has been quiet. And the neighbors haven't even realized that there's people trying to develop commercial establishments in our area. They keep their nose, but I happen to see what's going on and I have to take care of it because I know what's going to happen if we don't. And that's.
Thank you, Greg.
I have to do. Thank you.
We're going to get some other people.
I know. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
I have more to say later. Thank you.
Jan?
Thank you. I'm excited about what you're doing in terms of getting the information that none of us have. And I'm just curious, I put it in the chat, so maybe Eleanor's already answered, but I'm curious to know what ongoing resource these consultants provide for us when we come up as a community with like a concerted kind of effort against something, or so what else might be available to us, or is the grant used up?
To my knowledge, Mitra might know more about this than I do, but to my knowledge, the grant is used up. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So yeah, sorry, go ahead, Eleanor.
no, that's okay. And so again, we know this is just the first phase of a long, ongoing conversation.
Thank
But
you.
no, we would have loved to have a lot more information in the first phase. And again, the consultants were terrific in being able to anticipate that with the time and financial limitations of how could they provide us with information that could be as easily extrapolated, as possible. So they really worked wonderfully for us to be able to get as much bang for our buck as possible in that way. There's lots more information that's needed. There's no question about it. So.
Right.
But for
Thanks
this
for your work.
phase, this part's done. Yeah.
Miss Sherry. Hit your space bar.
You Siri?
You're muted. There you go.
Sorry, my Zoom froze. I'm on a Linux machine and it doesn't like to cooperate. To correct myself, I think I said I live on the southwest corner, it's the southeast corner. Feel free to stop by. White picket fence, blue house, ring the doorbell. Sure, hopefully one of us will answer. For me, I guess my question, I've only lived in the neighborhood for 2 years, but what would you do in terms of bringing more money into the area to develop or not to develop, as some people were concerned about, in terms of property values, maybe adding sidewalks, additional parks? Like, what could turning ourselves into a city bring that we're missing or actually interested in bringing to the area? That to me is what, after the presentations that I was kind of just pinging about in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question. And that actually gets into the meat of the report. And so, like I mentioned, this really just dropped to the community this morning. And so once you get through, I think, the executive summary, it gets to some really direct, it really spells out some really specific things about where there would be, benefits to either incorporating, not doing anything and remaining unincorporated, or potentially merging forces with the city of Milwaukee. And so there really are differences in those three possibilities. But tonight, we are not prepared to go into that. And I would love, and if you have time on October 9th, if you have a chance to read the report and have questions still, please feel free to reach out via any of our channels on email, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And it would be awesome if you could attend on the 9th, and we're really going to get into all of that and spell it out really clearly, at least just the data that the report offers to answer your question.
Okay, I signed up for the event on the 9th. The report is also in the chat message going on, or is there like a PDF someone could toss in there? Or I missed all the websites and everything else.
Right. At this point, the report, I just put it in the chat, but the report can be found on our website. There's a button on the home page at this point. And again, our website is oaklodgegovernanceproject.org. And so it just got posted, I think last night, as a matter of fact, that we just got that. So you can find it. You can find it there. And part of it, again, it's the idea of annexing, incorporation, remaining the same. What are the pros and cons to all those things? And what are the monies that come in? And it's complicated and nuanced. And a lot of it has to do with, any kind of tax rate is going to be based on what are the number of services people want and what level of services they want. So again, I think, we've only got a few more minutes so you guys can get on with the rest of the meeting needs that you need. But are there any questions about the process or how this research grant came up? And again, nobody's pushing any agenda. Nobody has any, there's no campaign involved. There's no here's just a few people wanting to make something happen. What we're trying to do is provide information. So Greg, what you're saying is, how do we have these conversations? What are we getting what we're currently paying for? Is that okay? Are people happy with this level of service they have or not? I think there's a real profound mismatch. And that's what we're trying to look at. What would it cost? What would it be like? What are the values of this area? And what kind of place do we want to live in that we're proud of and we have an identity for? That's what we're looking at. So, Ed, it's 7:55. If you want to keep up with your timing, then
I was going to ask one last question.
Sure.
As I told your group before, I think you're coming to what's going to be the most expensive and time-consuming part of the project, and that's trying to involve the entire community. Do you have plans to go in for another grant for that? Or are you, I mean, how are you going to handle it from now on?
You want me to take that, Mitra?
Yeah.
Well, part of it is we had to get the results. We had to get the study to find out, is this thing feasible? Because there's been a belief that, oh, this area doesn't have the right mix of, industrial and commercial and residential to be financially feasible and all these different things. So we haven't been able to say, okay, let's now go for a grant for the next phase. We've got to digest and understand and work with what we've got right now. But again, there's lots more information, and there's lots of misunderstanding about what it means, or what would incorporation mean, or annexing mean, or all those different things. So there needs to be a lot of time to work with each other and have the rich conversations and get through some of the preconceived notions and things like that, and figure out what's the other additional information we need. And as we all know, community is not a static thing. The world is not static these days. And so things are changing, and we need to roll along with those. And so we'll just do the best we can with what we got, where we are. And that's what we are. That's what we got. So thanks for that, Ed.
Thank you for a great presentation.
Lovely.
You have to move on. You can stay with the meeting if you want, or you can leave if you so choose. You will not be hurting our feelings at all. But thanks. It was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thanks again. Happy to come back anytime as this thing progresses. So, because again, the CPO meetings are a big place to be able to send this information out. And again, if there's anybody on this call that would like to have, participate in how we're going to keep this thing moving, please get in touch with us. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Eleanor. Okay, the next item on our agenda has to do with the notice land use hearings, which is pending before the county commission right now. In what's going to affect us the most is the effect it's going to have on the C3 areas along McLoughlin Boulevard. We sent a copy of this out to everyone who was invited to this meeting. I can review it very, very quickly. Really, it is three proposals. One is to increase the density bonus for affordable housing. Now we're talking about, in our case, the C3 areas. And right now, the density bonus is 8 units at 8%. So for each 100 units that are proposed, if they're going to be affordable, there's a bonus allowed of 8% or 8 units. What the county planning department is proposing is to increase that to 50%. So if you were going to be 100 units and you agreed to make these units affordable, you could have a bonus of an additional 50 units to be built on that same piece of property. That the second proposal was to reduce the parking requirements for the same type of property. Right now, the parking requirements are between 1 1/4 and 1 3/4 spaces, depending on the number of bedrooms in the units. What the county is proposing is to reduce this to from 1 to 1 1/2. Right now, it's 1 1/4 to 1 3/4. Reduce it to 1 and 1 1/2. And to allow for additional reductions, 20% for units affordable to households earning 31 to 60% of the area's median income, 40% for units that are affordable to people earning below 30%, and 40% for the reduction for units that are located within a 1/4 mile of a light rail station. So the idea is we found out, the county's found out, and we've known it for some time, that parking can add a great deal of expense to a housing development. and the less parking that a developer has to make available, the less it's going to cost. And what we're running into throughout the area, actually throughout the country, is the cost of affordable housing and how difficult it can be to build. And the last item that was proposed was to increase the allowed housing density in certain commercial zones. And for us, again, it would be C3. Right now, the limit is 25 units per acre, and this would increase it to 60 units per acre. What it would mean, it would make it possible for a developer to build a 5 or 6 story building along McLoughlin, which cannot be done at present under the present zoning codes. We've been told over and over again that it will pencil out for a developer if they can increase the zoning and if they can increase the densities, but if they have to keep it down to 25 or less units per acre, it does not pencil out, which is one of the reasons that we've had so much difficulty in getting development along McLoughlin. Grover, you've got your hand up.
I do. Thank you very much. So I'm concerned about the time frame that we're running up against. On July 1, this next July 1, this will go into effect for Clackamas County, including unincorporated Clackamas County. Not these specific zone changes, but the issue about putting further strain on our lacking of sufficient urban services. And specifically, I'm thinking of parks and transportation and several other things, not water and sewer. I talked to those folks. I'm very happy with what we have in that department, but we will just keep having less and less and less, and it's not being addressed. And it is a specific written exemption that unincorporated areas, unincorporated county areas within the urban growth boundary are exempt if they in fact if they lack sufficient urban services, and that's not being addressed. And we've got, what, 9 months, and then it's going to become effective. So that's not, I'm concerned.
Okay, well, let me read. Linda, can you hear us okay? Linda Newman. Can you hear us okay, Linda?
I can most of the time. Thank you, Ed. But if you would read that for me, I would appreciate it very much.
Okay, Linda sent me a statement I would like to read at this point. I would like to move that the Jennings Lodge Community CPO write a letter supporting all 3 proposed changes to the zoning ordinances. I believe the changes will help move us in the direction of providing more affordable housing for the greatest number of people without negatively impacting our neighborhood character or overall quality of life. Specifically, I feel the strongest about number 3, which is the allowed density that I just read that would increase it to 60 units per acre. Increasing the allowed density per acre in the commercial and mixed use zones as stated in the proposal. This is the only way we'll be able to attract developers willing to work with us on the development of a more desirable McLoughlin Boulevard experience. Bullet number 2, which is the flexibility in parking. Having attended many public meetings and hearings in Multnomah and Clackamas County regarding the issues surrounding affordable housing, I've learned that reducing the required number of parking spaces and increasing allowed density in our commercial and mixed use areas is about the only way for a developer to have a shot at making a fair profit. In conclusion, I'd also like to thank the county for the work done so far. I believe they're on the right track for all of us long-term and updating the density bonus as proposed in bullet number 1, and that is the bonus from 8 from 8% to 50%. Allows for a more level playing field. So we have two competing proposals here. Linda wants us to endorse this proposal. Grover, if I'm understanding you correctly, you feel that we should oppose it based on the lack of availability of parks. Is that correct?
No, actually, I'm pointing out what is not being addressed in these 3 points. These 3 points are fine with me. I don't have any objection to the 3 points. But what has been not discussed is the impact having this greater density will have specifically on our lacking sufficient urban services. And that's not being addressed. So I'm not opposed to these 3 things. I am opposed to ignoring the future impact on our urban services.
Well, let me ask you, how would you change it?
Change what?
I mean, the proposal the county is putting forth, you're correct, would go into effect next June if it were approved. What would you change to meet your worry about the lack of recreational services?
Well, I kind of go along with Greg Smith's conversation that there has not been a sufficient community engagement about the impact on our lacking of sufficient urban services and how this will impact us. And in the state legislature, they actually wrote in that we have an exception, and there's been no discussion. So how would I address it? I'm fine with approving these, but I do think we need to have a caveat that goes with it that says when between now and 9 months from now will we address that the unincorporated area is lacking sufficient urban services? Not all, but several.
Jan?
One of the issues around reducing the need for parking on a major street like that, in order for developers to be able to make a bunch more smaller houses, reminds me of Division Street. And anybody has been driving on Division Street, massive housing development, no parking. So then I would tell me then we need to have correlating rapid transit, more transit, different kinds of transit all along McLoughlin. I don't know where the C3 zone is. Ed, you haven't really explained. Is that everywhere?
That's the commercial zone along
Is that
McLoughlin.
from Park Avenue till Oregon City? Is that what, all of it?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't address transportation when you take away. I mean, this is not a big bike territory here. So, you know, it's not like the city. So I think that we need to suggest that developers play some role in transportation, either that or we all need to get on the stick and deal with TriMet. There's more to the conversation as I think what Grover is saying is I think everybody needs to be focusing on is you can't take it in pieces like this. Yes, we can let them have more density and get more, but you also, maybe they need to build a side building for parking, because I'll tell you, it's hell on Division Street and the neighbors are not happy.
I know what you're talking about. Kay Walker.
Hi, I'm a retired urban planner, and I concur with the density proposals, but I'm very concerned about just giving up the parking without a solid alternative as to where all of this additional parking will go. Otherwise, I can see all of the roadways, all the right-of-ways filling up with off-street parking. So I understand the financial implications, but without a solid alternative for all of this parking, I think you're opening the door to some really less than desirable standards of neighborhoods that isn't what you anticipate, but what you will experience in a suburban area like this without solid land use alternatives. Thank you.
Anyone else want to comment on this?
I have a comment.
Who is that?
Miss Erie?
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, could someone educate me as to why? So my mom lives in North Portland on, by Peninsula Park, and there's the yellow line, which turns into the orange line, which dead ends here, right? At the TriMet Center, at the tip of Milwaukee. Why did it not continue to Oregon City? What was that conversation started? Like money? It strictly came down to money. But there's goods in Canby that you could move up to Portland with the rail system at night when no one's using it. Like, did they not try to think of other ideas to fund it, or is it just taxpayer? So I'm just looking at the heads and people are shaking, giving me gestures. Interesting. Okay, because that would be great if we could complete the max. Continue it southern, towards the rest of the metropolitan area. But okay, interesting.
Jane, you had something you wanted to say.
Other people had their hand up before me, so I want to go in order.
I'm sorry. Who else? Who else was it? I don't see any other hands up at this.
Sorry,
point.
Jane.
No, that's okay. I think there's a lot of really good points, and I know in the working group conversations that this housing strategies team orchestrated, there were a lot of conversations about parking. And one of the things that just blows me away when I look at McLoughlin is we've got acres and acres and acres of parking that's completely underutilized. And what is it going to take to entice developers to cross that line, from Southeast Portland and Milwaukee and start to better use this real estate? Here we have a housing crisis, and we have acres and acres and acres of asphalt. And everyone I know whines about how many parking car lots we have, how much they hate them, how they have to go someplace else to get what they want. And it just seems to me that in order for us to make it pencil out to have additional transit, we've got to have a reason. We've got to have the bodies to get onto the light rail or bus services. The bus service on McLoughlin is actually not that bad. And if it weren't for the government, the Board of County Commissioners during the discussions, or at least this is my understanding, the discussions at the Board of County Commissioners when they were deciding where to terminate the orange line, they didn't want it to enter into Clackamas County. Our elected officials stopped that conversation cold. That is my understanding. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that in order for us to move into the 20th century, we have got to have some additional incentives for development, and we have this terrible housing crisis. And lastly, I think that the idea of increasing housing opportunities for people on this completely underutilized real estate is actually one of the things that's going to prevent the destruction of what we love about our neighborhoods with big trees and large lots and things like that. It's terrible when the children of my generation can't afford a house and have to live in Malala and commute 1,000 miles a day to their job. It's just like, this is idiotic. We have got to have increased density for housing on McLoughlin. So I would second the motion that Linda has put forth.
Steve.
Unmuting here. I just wanted to say, I had some brief comments. I put them on chat to everyone. So you get a little balloon, I think, when there's a new chat. If you just click it, you'll read my comments there. And I think the good points were made all around. And it's not like I would just add to what I wrote there. It's not as if no parking is required with these units. It's just a reduced level. So I don't know if they're typically doing that as indoor first level or even below ground level. parking for the residents, but however they are meeting that, there is a healthy degree of parking. And I guess I would also just emphasize, I would highly prefer that it be multi-use space. At a minimum, you know, you would have coffee shops or little gathering areas that people could walk into on ground level floors so that they encourage community exchange and usage and not just become insular caves where only the residents go in and out from. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, you had some good comments in the chat. You want to expand on them?
Yeah, sure. My comment has been that we just completed a transit study we've been working on for a couple of years, and you know, we found out that, you know, people really need to move around. They need to move around to work. They need to move around in different places, and we, you know, there are limited resources out there for transit, and we have not, you know, I think people believe that, you know, we haven't really got our fair share of that. And how do we get a more investment in coverage? And coverage in transit means, you know, providing transit areas that don't have transit. McLoughlin has good service. I mean, some people would prefer light rail, but we have a portion of that. There's ways to get to that. But if we continually invest in the corridors and spend all of our transit dollars on corridors that have existing transit and we don't spread it out, we'll never solve or bring out the coverage of the county. And if you look at our study, very detailed, there are huge areas, we call them transit deserts, where there's no transit service at all. And as tolling is being implemented and congestion pricing is being considered, and all these things are being considered, there needs to be alternatives that serve the people. So the parking issue is a very touchy one. And I think the staff recommendation, the day we approved this to move forward to the Planning Commission, the staff recommendation was even for less parking. So we actually bumped it up for all the reasons I think that were expressed here this evening and then some. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I have some of my own, but I was going to hold them until the end. Other comments on what's being proposed here? Well, let me talk for just a moment then. Oh, Karen, I'm sorry, I just saw your hand. Go ahead.
This is more of a procedural question. Do you consider, Ed, that having read Linda's letter that there is a motion on the floor?
Yes.
Okay, so has there been a second of, because you would have a motion, then you'd have a second, then you'd have discussion. So
yes.
Did we have a second on the motion?
I seconded in my comments.
Okay, so we have a second, and so we're still in the discussion phase. Just checking out the procedure here. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. When I was chair of the MAP committee, and I think even when I was vice chair, when Paul was chair of the MAP committee, we talked about development on McLoughlin. And I think it takes no imagination at all for all of us to understand that the population is going to continue to grow, and that where Metro wants to put a good part of the new population is in this area where we live. And I think we felt the best way to approach this would be to encourage as much of that new population as possible along McLoughlin and keep it out of the neighborhoods in order to protect our neighborhoods as best we could. And this was where the idea of the higher density in McLoughlin came from. I remember being with other members of the MAP committee, and including Joseph Edge, down talking to the planning department 4 or 5 years ago about increasing the zoning on McLoughlin to allow for denser zoning there. And at that time, the feeling in the planning committee, there wasn't sufficient community support to make this happen. I think this has changed. And of course, the zone, the housing crisis is much worse now than it was 5 years ago. And I think this is an honest effort by the county and the county planning department to face up to that housing crisis and to make it possible for us to increase the density in Clackamas County without having it impact the neighborhoods. And the way to do it is to increase the density on McLoughlin. What I would like to suggest is that we modify Linda's motion and indicate some concerns about the parking. Because I think I've had the same feeling that parking is going to be a greater issue than anything else. But recommend that we approve of the county's proposals for the density increases and the density bonuses, but we would like them to reconsider the parking. What is your feeling about this? Grover?
Right, I like where you're going with it, Ed. The only thing I want to clarify, when I spoke of lacking sufficient urban services, one of them is transportation. And listening to what Commissioner Savas just said, I don't know how to square that because I appreciate what he said. But if we had more housing there, then we could go to rapid bus or fareless zones or all those things along McLoughlin, which would encourage more growth there, which would fit all the things we want, keep them out of the neighborhood. So that's all a great thing. I would like to suggest that we add a caveat about the parking, that they actually increase the option for public transportation as a condition, which is one of the lacking urban services that we currently have.
Well, what would you propose as a change in wording then, Grover?
That we approve, I'd approve all three of them. Here's the thing that didn't get mentioned. Division is also under a major remodel now because of the number of accidents, people killed, maimed, and whatnot on that street with a lack of parking and all the crowded and so on and so forth. But I want to come back to, we should approve all three with an addendum to the one about parking. That parking is only going to be accepted if they address increased transportation that would offset the need for cars. And by the way, Maturi, if I messed your name up, it's $205 million a mile for light rail in our area to build it.
So several $billion.
Yep.
Thank you, Grover. Steve?
Yeah, so I'm concerned that we're talking about approving density only with qualifications to parking or possibly transportation. Maybe Commissioner Savas can enlighten us what the process for design standards is, because it seems like we're talking about potentially massive amounts of new development of a different kind than exists there now without community input as to design standards. For example, when I talked about multi-use requirements, I mean, there are just so many kinds of design standards applicable, lighting. And many, many years ago, I served on the Clackamas Regional Center area plan, and that's exactly what we did with staff and consultants, was work all of this out. So I'm in the dark as to what else would happen concurrently, or if permits are just going to be given out with just changes to density and parking requirements.
Commissioner Savas, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, well, I guess what I wanted to say is that state law, case law has demonstrated that a developer is typically responsible for impacts directly around or on their development and not much more. So things like, transit elsewhere is not their responsibility per se, but they do pay system development charges for transportation. They do pay system development charges for parks. They do pay a number of SDCs, which are to deal with the growth and expand that. We cities and counties typically existing, cities and counties typically do these things. It's more piecemeal. I mean, we do things in bits and pieces. We do a transportation project here. We do a land use density maybe project over here. Maybe we'll do a park somewhere else. It's not really cohesive like building a whole new city or a whole new area. So we've just got to realize that the entire county is really subject to more of a thorough planning. And I think, we have to just realize that because of lack of resources, we can't do everything all at once. And I think there's a reliance upon developers to bring money to the table that will stimulate other development that will make things happen. And that's relatively true. But I think we all agree that we shouldn't compromise our livability and our quality of life in our areas by doing such. So we need to find a way to secure that as best as possible. I'm sorry for the broad aspect of this, but I think, Grover's point is I totally understand it as far as urban services, and we're going to get there, unfortunately, as everything else, incrementally.
Thank you, Commissioner. Virginia.
Yes, I was agreeing with Grover's point. I do a lot of driving downtown Portland or southeast. I was on Division today. Foster Road has done a lot of changes as far as 4- and 5-story buildings, affordable housing, and the only difference is that Portland has parks, walkable parks every half mile. We don't have that, and that is something that needs to be considered in looking at the development. I like the idea of multi-use buildings. People need walkable restaurants, walkable grocery stores, and walkable parks, and we have very little to show for that. I love our Jennings Lodge Park, but I don't like to be, when I think of being in nature, I don't want to be smelling my neighbor's dryer sheets. We have a serious lack of green space, and this cannot be ignored anymore. And so they need to factor in green spaces before they put cram so many souls in one spot. And anyway, that's my input with that. For that.
Thank you, Lisa. Lisa Bentley, push the space bar down, Lisa.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Okay, I may be out of order on this one, but I have a concern about setting up plans for the same level of economic value for housing in a large area. You want diversity, you want middle income, high income, and low income all in the same area. And I would refer the commissioners to some studies which I think were done out in the Gresham area, which showed that many of the troubles that they have today in terms of policing and crime are the result of putting in massive amounts of middle and or lower income housing along the light rail without diversity. Thank you.
Karen?
First, I want to note that Jane has her hand up, so She's had her hand up for a long time, so she should go first and then I'll make my comments.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Jane. Go ahead.
Yeah, Kitty Walker had some interesting suggestions in the chat where she talked about creating incentives for transit. And she also talked about shared parking as a way to encourage a bit more efficient use of the real estate. And I just wanted to bring those forth because I don't know if everybody is reading the chat. There's also Steve and other people have all mentioned the idea for a mixed use along McLoughlin in order to have the walkable restaurants, the walkable coffee shops, and the other kinds of things. And that was a topic that was discussed, at least in some of the working group meetings that I attended. And then lastly, I think that Lisa's point about having a mixture of incomes at this at the new housing is an important point as well. The last thing I wanted to comment on is I think everybody's experienced kind of the canyon effect on division. But I think one of the things to keep in mind is division, the right of way is about 40 or maybe 60 feet wide. The right of way on McLoughlin is about 120 feet. It's a very, very different experience. So I don't want to create a worse atmosphere by whatever we do to McLoughlin, but I don't think it's going to be the same kinds of things that you would see at Division. And those are my points.
Karen.
I am not, the motion on the table is to send a letter in favor of three aspects that Linda named. And Ed had proposed an amendment that had to do with parking and concern about parking. Even with that amendment, I will not be able to vote for that motion because of, one, there not being a way to deal with parking, but equally the issue that Grover brought up about infrastructure. I understand that Commissioner Savas talked about incrementally fixing the infrastructure problems that we have, but they need to, that incremental approach has to be then also done with the proposals that are going to aggravate it, because if the density comes first, if these other elements come first and the infrastructure doesn't catch up, then we're in a way worse situation than we already were. So I would like to see a proposal that is talking about how it will deal with those infrastructure fixes. And if it's incremental, so are the other parts of this that go along. The whole thing's incremental, or the infrastructure gets fixed first. Either one is fine with me, but that's not currently represented in these proposals. Thank you.
Well, this is quite a situation. I think probably parliamentarily, we ought to take a vote on the motion which is on the floor. And if that fails, then we will have to decide what action, if any, we want to take. This thing is going to be proposed to the county commission. I think, let's see. Paul, do you have the date offhand? I think I have it here.
I don't have a date on
Yeah,
here.
I have it here. It's
October 6th.
October 6th is correct. It's already gone to the planning commission, and it's been forwarded to the county commission for a final decision, and their decision will be made October the 6th. We will have time to file comments with the county commission before that date. And I think, I've heard of a diversity of opinions. I know we've not been following normal parliamentary order. I apologize for that, but I expected a diversity of opinions. I didn't expect them to be this diverse, but this is good. This is good community input. This is what we want to hear. So I think the thing to do, first of all, would be I would call for a vote on the original motion on the floor, which was from Linda to send a letter of support to the county commission on all three proposals as they were laid out. The reduction in parking requirements, the increase in density bonuses for affordable housing, and the increase in density in the commercial areas from 25 to 60 units per acre. So all those in favor of that, will you send out a poll, please, Jane? And that would be poll number one. Grover, you wanted to say something.
Right, I just wanted to point out what Commissioner Savas put in the chat, and that is, this is for the entire unincorporated area, not just our area. Is that correct, Commissioner Savas? Okay, good. So, and we're addressing it from our area. So I just want people to recognize that it's for the entire unincorporated Clackamas County commercial zoning.
Thank you for pointing that out. You're quite correct. Jane, can you send out, the poll will be either approve, disapprove, or abstain. So can we have
The poll is out there. People are voting.
I would like to vote yes, and I'm hoping that I have unmuted myself and you can hear that because I cannot see the poll to respond to it. This is Linda.
We can hear you, and you will be registered as a yes vote.
And I will also say, while I've got the floor, that I am open to a friendly amendment as Grover was suggesting, or something that evolves from there. And now I'll go back to trying to mute myself. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Linda. Let this proceed first of all, and see how it comes out. I think we're ready to end the poll. Has everyone voted?
We've got 16, 17, 18 people have voted. And there's 26 people in the meeting. A couple of us cannot vote. Like Ed can't vote, I can't vote. Does that sound good enough? You ready to close the poll?
Yes, let's close the poll. And will you share the results, please? And as we can see, the motion failed. Now, Grover, do you want to offer a friendly amendment to Linda's motion? Her motion was to indicate support of all three proposals. And what is your amendment?
Mine, and I really love the way Karen put some nuance on it. Mine is that we're in favor of all three of these, and yet incrementally, we've been promised incrementally for more than 30 years to have parks, and the same thing about. So I appreciate McLoughlin's a great corridor, and if you happen to live there, but if you live off McLoughlin, it is not something that most people can walk up and down from up on Oakfield and so on and so forth. So my proposal is that we vote for all three of those, and there has to be a proposal on how the lack of sufficient transportation and parks are going to be addressed prior to implementing it. It's a great place to go forward, but not forget all the other.
I'd like to propose perhaps a version of that. Rather than a motion supporting this, how about if we send a letter to the county commission pretty much quoting what you said, that we're in favor of these three proposals for the McLoughlin area, but we have severe doubts, or we have strong concerns having to do with the lack of community facilities, parks, and adequate transportation to handle the increased density. Does that sum it up? You're shaking your head, yes.
Yes, that's good. Sure, it does. So we're sending a letter saying we're in favor of it, and yet what's missing is, correct?
Yeah.
Jan, you have your hand up?
Nope.
Okay, yes, and I would specify if possible in that letter that those services include parks, transportation, parking, and walkability. So that people, and I understand we're not proposing the solution and we're not saying no unless this can happen, but I don't see being in favor of something when we have so many provisos, provided this, provided that. So I love the idea of a letter. Thank you, Ed, because I don't think the county commission cares whether we voted thumbs up or thumbs down. Honest to God, they haven't followed.
I don't think they do either.
Right. So they really want to know what we expect.
Right.
So thank you.
I agree with you. What's a general feeling? Well, let's get you can go to the reaction section on the bottom. How many thumbs up do we get for what's being proposed here? Can you give me a thumbs up? Do you find it, Pat? Okay, there we go. I think that pretty well sums it up. I think I will have to get together with, would Jane, would it be you or would it be Karen to put together such a letter tomorrow? Karen, I think you're probably the person I should talk to. Well, Paul, you have your hand up. I'm sorry. I didn't see your hands.
Ed, as a point of procedure, are you counting that thumbs up as an official vote of the CPO?
I'm counting.
If that's so, then I didn't do that, so I didn't get a chance to participate.
I think what I was trying to do was to get a feeling of general agreement, and the feeling I get is by far the majority of the people in the room agree with that approach.
I think you need to take an official vote on that, Ed, to make sure that you've done the proper job in making sure you have the majority and restating what it is that you're going to do.
Right, and we have another poll. We can use that for this motion if you wish.
Okay, just a minute. Let's let Paul and Pat Reiner make their points. Paul, what did you want to say?
Yeah, just quickly, I've just put it in the chat. I would just say that the commissioners would probably value the input of what you have concerns about. So I've heard tonight, and I don't know if you were all there. So, but I heard parking was an issue. I heard, basic services or lack of urban services, and transit as three issues that I've heard. I may have missed one or two, but I would spell them out in whatever communication you send.
That's what we intend to do. Pat? The space bar, Pat.
You have to talk, you have to unmute, push the space bar.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
In your letter, I would also like to have you address that we are concerned that we do not want this parking to trickle over into surrounding areas, because that is a factor that I think that you mentioned on division. And I think we need to address that issue too. We don't want it to trickle out into the neighborhood, this traffic that we're cutting off with regard to spaces in the particular area. Make sense?
Yes, but legally, that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to enforce unless you have. And
we could just address it in the letter. Maybe you can't do anything about it, but it's a concern.
Okay, I think we've already touched on that. And in order to satisfy Karen, I think what we would need is a poll indicating whether or not you support the idea being proposed there as a letter to the county expressing our general support with the caveat that we are worried, we have concerns having to do with lack of amenities, parks,
Transportation.
walkability, and maybe insufficient parking. You send out the poll, please, Jane.
Who is the second on that motion?
I'll be second.
Okay, so Jan, for the record, Virginia, Jan is the second. And so Ed is the motion maker, is that correct?
Yes. I hope everyone is seeing the poll, please. And Linda, I assume you want to be marked down as yes on that poll. Anyone else need to vote? I think we have the results. You want to share them, Jane?
Here we go.
You're muted, Jane.
There's the results. We have 11 yeses, 4 noes, and no abstentions. And I believe we have not included Linda's yes in that, and I would include my own yes in that. So there would be a total of 13 yeses, 4 noes, and 0 abstentions. Ready to stop sharing?
I think we can stop this. Well, we don't know when. Don't stop sharing yet. I mean, we have one more item we have to cover yet tonight. I'm sorry we're running late, but I wanted to give us time to really thoroughly discuss this, and I'm glad we did. Cynthia, you want to make your presentation now, please?
2 more.
Okay, everyone can hear me, I'm assuming.
Yes.
So a few of us got together based on some discussion from the last meeting to talk about traffic control. And I can put up the little memo I wrote if that's helpful. It's not long.
I think the memo was sent out to everyone.
It was. And so I could share it, or we could just talk through it quickly. We're just looking for support of the CPO as I put together request to our Clackamas County Traffic Safety Commission and to Joe Merrick, who is a Clackamas Transportation Safety Manager. So Robert Kunis and I and Jane and Angela and Brenda met to kind of hash out what we've been seeing with this new development here at Jennings Lodge. There's 72 new houses, and we've seen increased traffic on Jennings, and the particularly the stop sign that's on Jennings and River is just horrendous. I've seen myself a couple accidents. I've heard people have very close calls on that corner. And when I walk, I walk that every day, at least once a day, sometimes twice a day. I always have to watch to make sure drivers are actually going to stop at that stop sign. And I think Jane has talked to the casual conversation with the sheriff, and that's a notorious intersection. So the biggest one on our list is we are going to ask for a blinking red, similar to what's further down the road. I think it's at maybe Courtney. It's not a stop sign. They're just showing you it's an intersection to be watchful of. So we're asking them to put in their work plan a flashing red overhead at that four-way stop, Jennings and River. So I don't know where that'll fall, but I've talked to Joe a little bit. Grover gave me his name. And he didn't say no, but you know, it'll be worked into the work plan probably. The other issue is there's two T's, I call them. It's an intersection of Jennings and Wilmot and Jennings and Morse. And I've also seen people fly through there, not even look, even though they may not know the rules of the road. So they're just kind of flying through there, which is really dangerous because now we have little kids also on bikes that are flitting around the neighborhood. So not only do we have car-to-car accident possibilities, but we got these little kids running around. You know, it's a good thing. We like little kids. It's a good thing to have new little kids in the neighborhood, but it's awful dangerous when there's absolutely no traffic control. And I sat in on a traffic safety commission meeting, and they did say normally when you have a T, they don't put a traffic control is the normal SOP. So I don't know if we'll have much luck with those two. We'll see. And then the fourth one was really for Jane's neck of the woods, where people are flying around, or not flying, but they're coming down Jennings to where it meets up with Willamette, or they're coming up Willamette to get onto Jennings. And specifically, there's some hidden driveways there. So we were hoping to get a hidden driveway alert or some type of signage there put up by the county. So those are the four things we'd like to be able to do to add the support of the CPO is the reason I'm bringing it up here tonight.
Would you like to add them? I'll make a motion to that effect.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that I be able to submit these items with the support of the Jennings Lodge CPO.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Jane, you want to launch a poll again?
As far as discussion, I think it's a great idea.
I'm sorry. I didn't know there was discussion. Grover, did you want to say something?
I just want to say, I think it's a great idea, and I really appreciate community participation so we can let our voices be heard, because otherwise they don't know what we need.
Thank you. Well, you all should have the poll. Would you please vote on the poll as quickly as possible? I've run us way over time.
We got 13 yeses so far, 0 no's, 0 abstains.
That's enough to carry it.
Thank you. And just real quick, Vincent asked about flashing lights on the stop signs. Curious enough, there was flashing light on the stop sign there on River, and I noticed it's not there anymore. So I don't know why. And I'm thinking it has to do with, I was reading there's been a change in the rules of the road for bicyclists, and it's a little bit different if there's a flashing red attached to the stop sign versus not. Don't quote me on that. Jonathan, I think, or Jonathan was here, he's a big bicyclist. So yes, there was flashing reds, but they're not there anymore. They got taken down.
Well, at the corner of Arlington and 82nd in Gladstone, there is a 4-way stop sign by the Safeway there, and it's got a flashing red, a flashing sign over it. It doesn't seem to have much effect, I've noticed, but it's there.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia. Grover, I'm sorry to make you wait so long.
That's quite all right.
You want to?
And I'll be quick.
Go ahead.
Okay, good. So, so first of all, knowing the familiar faces, for most of you, I don't have a whole lot new to say, other than both in the area of library and parks, the big issue is what's going on with Concord. And if, for those who don't know, because of sticker shock, that I'll be a bit flip about it, but it came in higher with the current building requirements and cost of materials, et cetera, than anticipated. So the whole project is on a 4-month hold to reevaluate how the money and the costs, the money available and the costs can be accommodated and or what can be built. So I am concerned about that being including so much of this project had the promise of robust community involvement. And so I would like during this 4 months that we get to be included in that conversation. And it's real. I mean, it's what's going on. I didn't build my own ADU because of that same reason. So it's real. And we just have to look at all of these things that are needed. Where's the money going to come from? Which brings me to the other point I wanted to speak to. The District Advisory Committee, for those who, for North Clackamas Parks and Rec, has been expanded to include 11 people. We have 2 representatives here. I'm one of them. And we have 2 up north of us and 2. So anyway, altogether we have 8 representatives, of which represent the unincorporated. And then we have 2 that represent the city of Milwaukee and 1 Milwaukee Center. It's only going to work if people let those folks who are representing you know what you care about, what you want. So that's what I have so much appreciated about this conversations that we've been having, these conversations tonight. It is people finding out about what they didn't know about and speaking up. So there is an email address. It's hard to remember. It's DAC, that's District Advisory Committee @ncprd.com. That any communication you send to that will go to all of the District Advisory Committee members. And so you can let us know. Now you also, my email's all over the place. So if you want to let me know directly, please do. But let people know, case in point, what we were just talking about, our concern about our lack of parks.
Would you repeat?
Our concern about lack of transportation, different issue, but those things people need to know about. The only other thing I want to speak to is the whole reason I got involved in this is having this. We're going to have more people be directly involved, feeling heard, feel that we can get things that we need resolved or at least addressed, which allows people to be more like it belongs to them and we're included in that. Because if we don't find a way to get more money, nothing big is going to happen. So this incremental part, it will take more money, but people have to understand that they're being listened to and it's addressing the concerns we have, as opposed to we'll get to that in 30 more years. So that's all I really have in hard stuff. I really encourage folks to start looking at what they have in the way of parks around them. And if you care about any one of them, start forming a friends of unofficially, so you can find others who care about it. We have a Friends of the Trolley Trail is alive and well and has been going on for years, so it still exists. But does the Boardman Wetlands, which by the way, I really want to give thanks to Oak Water Services and their ratepayers for the great contribution that was made to make that thing a real thing. So thank you guys. People. Guys is a generic in that term, but anyway, thanks.
Grover,
so,
would you repeat,
yes, sir?
Would you repeat the email address again?
Yeah, it's DAC, District Advisory Committee is what it stands for, @NCPRD, North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District.com.
Thank you very much.
Jan put it on chat. You can actually swipe and copy that onto your computer.
Oh, good. Somebody did put it on chat? Thanks.
Jan did.
And then the last thing I want to speak to is for the upcoming meeting, it's going to be on October 13th. It's from 5:30 to 7:30. You're all welcome to be there. The more people are there and participate, we have several opportunities for public comment about various things, including how is community being included in naming of parks? And one of the parks that's going to be discussed specifically, a number of people have spoken to, is how are we going to name Boardman Wetlands so that it fits for our community? And thanks for all the work that's been done for all this, got us this far. It is going to be brought up because it didn't follow the policy, and that's what we're going to be doing, community input. And lastly is on a future meeting, we're going to be talking about the zones so that all the funding that goes in can be looking at where the needs are throughout the entire district as opposed to individual zones. And that's been a long time coming, and we have support from a lot of circles, but got to move it through the process. Any questions?
Thank you, Grover.
Was that fast enough for you, Ed?
That was great. Thank you, Grover. We are at the end of our agenda, thank goodness. And I'm only 10 minutes late. This is the space. I have allowed 5 minutes for comments or announcements. Jane, I know you had one you wanted to make.
You're not mute. You're muted, Jane.
Jennings Lodge and Oak Grove are part of a Clackamas County Sheriff's Enhanced Law Enforcement District. Our representative is Tom Andrusko, who lives on Jennings Avenue, and he wanted me to encourage everyone to attend the advisory committee meetings, which is every 6 weeks, and the next one will be the end of October, or send communication to the advisory group. And if the CPO would like to send anything to their advisory group, they would be very willing and very happy to receive it. The end.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Grover, how do we get the information for that meeting coming up? It sounds really interesting. I thought I was on the email list, but maybe not.
I'd be happy to tell you how that works. And not only that, we have some local folks who will make sure if you're on our distribution list that you'll find out. Is that correct, Jane?
Well, what was the
Yes,
question?
this is Karen answering. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So I'm going to get something in the email saying how to get into that meeting. It's on the 13th. Is that what you mentioned? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And you could also go to ncprd.com and it will be posted a week prior to the 13th with the agenda and the link and all those things. Okay.
Okay. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Karen, you had something.
I do. This is actually a teaser for Commissioner Savas. I understand the C4 retreat is coming up this weekend, the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee retreat. And I understand that they have invited, or we heard that they were inviting into the virtual audience or into the audience CPO and Hamlet members. So if that's true, can you tell us that and how we might be able to do that?
Okay, so our C4 retreat has always been open to the public. It's posted usually on the county calendar because usually the county commissioners attend. So it should be listed on the calendar. I will make sure that Everett gets you all the Zoom link to that if you want to attend. It's designed for the retreat is designed for members of the C4 committee and its affiliate organizations, and CPOs are one of those, and members of the CPOs are one of those. So, you know, virtually everyone is somewhat invited, and it'll be 2 hours from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Friday, and from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, all virtual. Be there if you like and listen in. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or announcements they would like to make? If not, thank you for bearing with me. I've stumbled my way all the way through to the end of the agenda. So at this point, we will get word out. We will probably be meeting again in early to mid-December, unless there's a good reason to meet before then. So if we don't see you before then, have a great Halloween, have a great Thanksgiving, and good night.